the BW marketing world, BW dialogue, we have a thought leader, we have a doer, we have a practitioner of marketing science. If marketing was a science, most people believe it's a combination of art and science. Somebody who brings science, data, analysis to the very glamorous business of building brands and businesses. Let me welcome Mr. Sandeep Dayal, who's the Managing Director and EVP at the Serenity Marketing Group, and he's based out of Chicago in the US. He's a board member of many venerable boards, and he's the author of Right Between the Years, How to Use Brain Science to Build Epic Brands, and epic brands build epic businesses. So in that sense, how to build businesses that last. So welcome, Sandeep. Congrats on the book being published. I would be mighty happy if you showed the readers and viewers a copy of your book.
Oh, sure.
Right Between the Years. I can see it right, multiple copies there. So
there, yes. And Anurag, thanks for hosting this show. It's a real honor to be on this show. I know you've had many luminaries. Hopefully I can live up to your expectations and your viewers' expectations. So this is the book. It's available in stores and Amazon in India.
Now, Sandeep, this is being streamed live on businessworld.in and bwmarketingworld.com. For those of you who don't know Mr. Sandeep Dayal, he's well known. A lot of my friends reached out saying, "Oh, you're talking to Sandeep?" I said, "Yes." But you know, he went to an alma mater that could have been my alma mater, but I didn't take admission there. He went to BITS Pilani. It's definitely my father's alma mater. And then he went on to the Yale School of Management, from where he did his MBA in Marketing and Finance. He worked with the Dexter Group for many years. Then he worked at Booz and Company. Then he worked in McKinsey and Company. Then he was CMO of the Zyman Group. And now, for the last 17 years, he's been involved with the Serenity Marketing Group. And they work with venerable brands, businesses, to give them the consumer research to build brands and business, the insights, if I may say. So, Sandeep, welcome. Why this book and why now?
You know, that's a great question. As you mentioned, actually, we've been doing this work around brands for a long time. And in my company, Serenity, we've been working with some of the world's greatest brands for the last 20 years. And as we worked through that, we really saw this need that there were a lot of advances that had taken place in cognitive neuroscience and psychology, in behavioral economics and anthropology, linguistics, you name it. There's a lot of advances that have taken place in these different social fields, which in essence really reveal a lot about what happens in your mind, what happens in your brain, how that works. And we were using that knowledge pretty systematically with our clients and seeing better and better results in building these brands. And for the longest time in those 20 years, we never felt like we had to share that, right? Because that was our competitive advantage. This is how we made money. This is how we did better than other companies. And we didn't want to share that knowledge. So all this while, we've been developing it. We've been making it better, but we kept it to ourselves. But right now, I think we're at a stage where we feel, that we've established our place in the world. We are best known for this particular branding style. But it felt like the right time to share this knowledge. And I would say some of that clarity might have even come as a result of the pandemic.
And now that you've given the background in terms of it was in some way building a playbook to looking at the future trends and basing businesses on the back of that. Now, again, the last 17 months have been very traumatic for a lot of people. I'd like to ask you both personally and professionally, how are the last 17 months and how does this book fare in a post-pandemic world? I assume that you started writing it or conceptualizing it in the pre-pandemic world, pre-Feb 2020, and we are in July 2021. So how is this book relevant in post-pandemic world, or dare I say even more relevant? So give us a sense, how were the last 16, 17 months professionally and personally for you, and why is this book relevant for a post-pandemic world?
Okay, yeah, and that's such a deep question. It's about the shared experience, this common shared and experience of humanity itself, if you will. And as I mentioned earlier, that one of the reasons why we decided to share this knowledge, why I decided to share this knowledge in this book, was the clarity that followed from the pandemic. And what do I mean by that? I want you to step back and think about this question for a second, which is, if you're riding in a bus and the bus is going on a really high mountain and the bus goes off the cliff, right? There is 3 seconds left in your life, and you realize that, and what goes through your mind in those 3 seconds, right? That's a question that we collectively as humanity have had a lot to think about, right? In the last 16 months or what have you. And for me, the answer was that I would not want to have any regret, right? In those 3 seconds, I would not want to feel any regret about my life. And and I felt like all of this knowledge that I had built up in the last 20 years, which is very useful, I just felt like this is knowledge that ought to be shared, and which is one of the reasons why the book came about. But in writing the book, I felt a lot of joy because I was reliving a lot of my past experiences, some of my best professional experiences. And I also felt a lot of relief that, this was finally something that was getting out. So I think, what has changed, let's talk about, so that's on a personal level. You also asked professionally what has changed. I think this has been a time of introspection for even businesses, right? We have all focused on shareholder value, we've focused on profits and all of those types of things, and that is true for most of my clients. But I think the pandemic forced brands and businesses to think more about their purpose. Maybe what has changed, and I hope what has changed, is that we have this whole notion of businesses with a conscience be something that is deeper and something that may stay more permanently with us.
In the book, you talk about you talk about the fact that you start the book by talking about a singer in Australia who creates a mega hit. Uh, and is there a playbook to creating something that will become so popular, will become a cult? Uh, and is there a playbook to documenting that? And is your book that playbook that looks at what can be done to be then follow the process and hopefully create something that comes out winner every single time you do it? And when I was younger, as I would say that a lot of musicians are one trick ponies. They get one big song, which is a big hit, and then for rest of their careers, they don't get that big a hit. They get hits, but not that big. So possibly, if you can figure that out and give
Yeah.
us a sense of, it can make a lot of people happy and richer.
Yes, I think that's another $1 million question, which is, and it sort of gets to this whole idea um, that brands, like people, have a soul to them, right? So it's not just the product differentiation that you see, but it's also this other thing which is kind of indescribable, which lives with the brand just as it lives with people. And you can think of it as the brand soul. And that's not only true for brands, it's true for many, many things like music, as you mentioned. It's the same thing. And some music has soul, and you can clearly feel it. And it can have the same music can sometimes have different soul. Like, for example, when you talk about um, this very popular song that I love, which is called Sun Raha Hoon Main, right? In Sun Raha Hoon Main, you've got Ankit Tiwari that has sung it, you've got Shreya Ghosal that's sung it. And you listen to those, and those pieces have soul to them, and they have a different soul. And each different song has its own personality. And it's the same thing with brands, that you have to find that way of attaching that soul to them. Now, can you replicate it? That's a very difficult question. I think the answer is more and more yes for brands, because what we are learning about, certainly in the research that I mentioned to you, in fields as distinct as cognitive behavior therapy, as well as anthropology, social anthropology, and so on. We're learning so much more that for brands, we can increasingly say yes, that there is a formula that we can get to. is there a formula that you can get to when you talk about songs, right? Which is, can you replicate what Shreya Ghosal does with Sundrahaume? I don't know about that, but the one thing that you have to think about there is that there are certain things that we do know about a brain, which is that it responds to patterns. It responds to certain shades of images and so on. So when there is the right song, it's like the beat is right, the bass is right, the voice is right, everything just falls in place, and that's why the brain just instinctively responds to it. And that is why you have those one-hit wonders, and it's very hard to replicate those, frankly. And but not so for brands. I think for brands we can do that more and more today.
When I was reading the book, and marketing hood books can be interesting, and with your background, you throw in so many examples, and you talk of Nobel Prize winner economists who did a lot of studies and research in psychology, and they looked at how consumer behavior affects economy, and they won Nobel Prize for that. Clearly, because they were not seen to be people who were looking at consumer behavior.
Right.
How consumer behavior then impacted the economy, and that's how they won the Nobel Prize in economy. You talked of concepts like CBT, fMRI, PET. Then you talk of BRAIN, which is an acronym. You talk of viral advocacy creators, and you talk of tactical accelerators. You talk of invisible, decisions, or decision creators. How do you create those? Because right up front in the book, you talk about the fact that consumers need handholding, especially while making decisions. The brands that can simplify that process can win. So give us a sense into these concepts, and what do business owners, brand owners do to be able to create brands that are right between the ears, so to say.
Sure. And so, the many wonderful questions, Anurag, that you asked there. Let me maybe touch on some of those, and if I miss a few, then do remind me. But the essence of the book, if you will, or the basic premise of the book, is that brands are about choice, right? Everything, and in that sense, it's very much more relevant to our lives because we are making choices all the time. But brand really are choices. And when you think about what choice is and what the premise of the book is, that choice ultimately is biology. And what do I mean by that, right? Because everything that we perceive about reality, everything that we perceive about brands, is something that is interpreted inside our head, in our brain. And if you split open your head and look inside, what are you going to find? You're going to just find biology. You're just going to find cells. And therefore, everything that we have to understand about designing brands in some form or fashion has to begin with an understanding of how the brain works. And what we found in reflecting on all of this research is that ultimately what lives in those cells, what lives in that biology right between your ears, are essentially two things. One is your past experiences, right? So everything that you're taking in from the time that you're born, everything is sort of just going into your brain and it's living there in some form or fashion. It's not an exact recording, but it is some kind of a sensation of your past experiences that is living there. The second thing that's in your brain is your fantasies. These are your aspirations about the future, who you want to be, what you want for yourself, what you want for the world, and so on. These are things that haven't happened yet. These are fantasies, and these also live in your brain. And that's the only two things in there. And what happens is that when you have brands, when you have music, when you have all of these different things, when they just hit the right note, so to speak, they release those fantasies or they release sensations of those past experiences. So the examples I give is, if you grew up, whatever, if you're in Delhi and you went to South Extension and you were having chaat in South Extension, right? And I remember when I was in India, and this is many years back, I still remember that. I haven't had that chaat for a long time. but that sensation of how it tasted, how it felt to stand in that corner and eat golgappas and all those things, or that dahi chaat, right? All that comes back to you in whatever that South Extension chart brand meant, right? So it's like a key. So a brand is like a key that just unlocks those sensations, and all those memories and sensations just come flooding back to you, and they want you to make that choice again. They want you to be in that same place, or you want to have that experience again. So the purpose of brands becomes that they have to become a key that can help you unleash sensations of those cherished memories or sensations of fantasies that you harbor, because that's what makes you make certain choices. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Unmute yourself. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. So you talked about now, and you talked about in the book, that how is brain science revolutionizing branding. So give us a playbook for revolutionizing brain science, in the sense taking the right things from it and applying it to the art and science of marketing and creating a playbook. So, and especially what's new and different in that.
Right, right. So there's a lot that's new and different, Anurag. A lot is changing, and I think it's up to marketers, and there's a responsibility that marketers have today to make sure they understand what is new and different. And we can talk about a number of things, but so let's maybe take an example of what is new and different, and then I will talk about what is the playbook. Okay, so let's separate those two things out. And I'm not going to go through all the differences, but I'll just give some examples. So one example is that, people have thought that attention spans are very limited, that people have very short attention spans. And marketers have operated on that assumption for the longest time. And it's actually a fallacy. And here's how it's a fallacy, because people have said, it seems intuitively obvious that, okay, you know what, if there are so many different brands that are competing for your attention, consumers' attention span is going to be small, it's going to be very short. And therefore, you got to get your message in 2 words in that attention span. But it doesn't work like that. I mean, it seems that it would work like that, but it doesn't work like that, because, if you package your message in 2 words, people might not have been paying attention at all, and you'll miss the opportunity. And what we have found is that, in fact, people have long attention spans. And really the issue is whether you can engage that attention span by telling good stories. So storylining, remember I was talking to you about how the brain responds to patterns. One of the other things that the brain responds to is storylines. If you have a good story to tell, then you will hold people's attention. People go to movies all the time and they have their attention on that movie for 2 hours. So attention span is not a problem. It is how you say things, how you tell those stories that makes a big difference, which allows these things to happen. The other thing that we're learning, interestingly enough, is the concept of residual processing. That means that the brain sometimes takes in information. It doesn't register at that particular moment, but that information is inside your head. And then the brain processes that information later on. In fact, in my book, I argue that some of that information is processed while you sleep in your dreams, right? Dreams are not there just by accident or for no purpose at all. Dreams are there because the human body has a very specific purpose for those dreams. And they do something which is called memory consolidation. I take it further than memory consolidation. It's not just memory consolidation, it's also learning. So sometimes the messages that you see are processed much later in your brain. And that's why we have all of these aha moments, so to speak. You might be thinking about a problem sometime, and then you walk out of the shower one day and you suddenly have the answer. And you weren't even thinking about that problem. It just sort of comes to you. Or you wake up one morning and some problem that you hadn't been able to sort out for the last week or 2, suddenly seems the answer is right there. And that's because that whole process, the brain just finished crunching through all of that information during your dream, through your residual thoughts, and you had the answer. So marketers have to be very careful in not making a simplistic assumption like, hey, human attention spans are short. They can be, but many times they're actually quite long. So that's just one way in which our thinking is shifting. Now let me go to your second question, which is around this. And by the way, in the book, I describe many more different ways. Just that was just one example. There are many other ways in which the thinking needs to shift, and I describe those in the book. Now let me go to your second question, which is, so how do you design these brands which can unlock these experiences? How do you design these brands which can unlock these fantasies? And in the book, I present a very specific framework for how that works. And there are three parts to that framework. One part is around the brand, what I call brand vibes. And that is simply the notion of the brand making a connection with the consumer. You know how as people like to connect with each other. If you and I feel like we have a common chemistry, that we share a certain empathy, certain values, then we are more likely to believe each other, right? Anurag, that happens to all of us, right?
Absolutely.
So that is one piece of it. What is that brand vibe? What is that brand empathy? That is part of that soul that I described around the product. The other piece of it is that whatever it is has to make sense to us. Now, it can make sense to us on a gut feel basis, like an instinctive basis, or it can make sense because we did a lot of spreadsheets and analysis and then it made sense, right? But whichever way, whether it's deliberative, whether it's instinctive, things have to make sense to us. And then the last piece is that we have to have some inspiration, some resolve, which gets us off that fence of indecision and indifference, because we can be indifferent and undecided about a lot of things, even when they make sense. And so we have to have those triggers that get you off into that direction of action and going out and getting that brand or acquiring that brand. So good brands, good cognitive brands, as I call them now, have those three pieces. They have good vibes, they have good sense, and they have good resolve.
Beautiful. Now, you also talked about, there is that the marketing brain works a little differently. In some way, you illustrated that. And you say right up front that there is, what is in between the ears, of course, is the brains. And really, it responds to stimuli. And why some people stand in queues and do shopping in the old-fashioned, physical retail, as we would call it, whereas a lot of people do smart shopping through e-retailing. And in America, for almost 20 years, a lot of people would buy online but collect offline to save time, whether it was Sears or any other supermarket. So give us a tell that how can one, as a business owner, brand owner, design cognitive brands, these brands that understand how the marketing brain works, and then design products, ideas, service, and the communication around that.
Okay. All right. So let me break that up into two parts, because you asked firstly the question around, what is this marketing brain? And then the second question you asked was, can we have some example of how a brand would work? So let me just, take it into those two parts. So part one about how what is this marketing brain? I think, and again, this is described in the book, but nonetheless, the two important things to think about and reflect on here is that the brain is biology, and what happens is that when we have thoughts, when we have perceptions of different brands, right? These are things that have to be perceived at a cellular level. And what do I mean by that? That means that something in your biology in the brain has to change for you to be able to register that information, right? And therefore, what we have realized is that everyone, not just we tend to think of other people as being stubborn and us as being remarkably flexible, and it's not true. We are all stubborn. And the reason is that everything that we know, those past experiences that I talked about, they are stored in the form of certain neural connections in your brain. And those connections have to be broken or altered if you're going to change your mind about anything, right? So, and that's not easy. How easy is it to change something that's like a tattoo on your skin, right? If you get a scar, how easy is it to change that biology? It's not. And the same thing happens in your brain, that all your past memories sit inside your brain like scars. And those cars have to change before you can change your mind, which is what makes it difficult for people to accept brands which are revolutionary or are a completely different way of doing things. You know, even if you're talking about cars, electric cars, right? They are very different. And it takes a long time for people to actually believe that an electric car is going to be reliable and then you can go in it, the battery won't fail and you won't get stuck somewhere. People don't just go out and buy these different types of things.
Old habits and conditioning.
Old habits and conditioning. Habits is another way of saying that, you know, we're stubborn people. Our biology is wired in a certain way. So what happens is that when you're designing with brands, the big advice that I give to people is that don't fight it. You know, if people believe in certain things, it should be your preference to firstly go with what they already believe, because you're not going to change their biology all you know, overnight. Now, if you happen to be someone that has a very innovative and different product, then, you know, you do have to make, you know, stand there and make that fight. And there are ways to do that. But what we have learned in terms of understanding our brains is that 95% of the time, the brain makes choices instinctively. That is, you go with your gut feeling. Only 5% of the time do you think about it rationally in terms of analyzing the situation and considering the pros and cons and what have you. 95% of the time, you just go for things. So that happens because you are trying to go for things that are already in your learning. So that sounds very theoretical. Let me just kind of try to bring it to what you were saying. Let's talk about an example. So one of my favorite, all-time favorite brands that I worked with is a children's nutrition product, which is called Pediasure. It's actually available in India as well, but it's a global product. And it's like a milkshake kind of a product, right? If you drink it, it kind of tastes like a milkshake. It's like a milk and so on. But what this product has is that it has all the vitamins, minerals, nutrients that a child could need for their nutrition. So when we started working with a company called Abbott, which is actually based here in Chicago. And this product was initially, when it was introduced originally, it was a medicine, which is that, you know, if there was a child that was so sick that they could not even eat, then you could, and they were in a hospital, they could actually take this product and they would be guaranteed to get all the nutrition that they needed in the right quantity and in all the right nutrients. So balanced and complete was basically the line. So it was sold in hospitals all around the world. Not a very big product because it was a medicine. And what Abbott wanted to do was to turn this into more of a consumer product so that more people would have it. And at that time, you know, I'm going to guess the sales were less than 500 million for sure, maybe even less internationally. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar product. And this was, you know, we began this transformation 15 years back. Now, what happened was that when we started doing research, you know, we said, okay, you know, we're going to talk to people and find out how to make this a consumer product. And what we found was that in Indonesia, for whatever reason, this product was just doing so well. So we said, okay, let's go to Indonesia and find out why this product does so well. And when we went to Indonesia, and what we found there was a particular belief that was wired into the women, into moms' minds, so mothers, what they believed. And what happens is that when you have children, really young children, the one thing that is there is that mothers believe that their children are picky eaters. What that means is that when you look at children, they don't eat the things that adults want them to eat. And adults are also kind of silly because they think that children will like the things that they like, you know. So you think, oh, the adult is going to eat, you know, the child should be eating spinach, he should be eating, you know, green beans, and he should be eating broccoli and so on. Children don't like that. You know, children want to eat fun stuff. You know, they want to eat candy. They want to eat, you know, hot dogs or hamburgers or something, whatever. All the junk food, they love that, fried chicken and so what happens is that when children do that, moms get very insecure. They feel like, gee, maybe I'm not a good mother. Maybe my cooking sucks, and that's why the kid is not eating this. Or maybe they feel like there's something wrong with my child, and that's why he's eating all this junk food instead of eating all this other good stuff that I make. And so what we found is that women already believe that their children are picky eaters. And we did this research, by the way, not just in Indonesia, but we went to Malaysia, we went to Vietnam, and we went to Mexico. And everywhere that we went, the main complaint that moms had was that my child is a picky eater. So remember what I said about, you know, don't try to change people's minds. So if people already believe that, so what we did is Originally, the product was positioned as Pediasure is the product with balanced and complete nutrition, and it didn't go anywhere. With a few words added to that, which is Pediasure is balanced and complete nutrition for children that are picky eaters. When you add those three or four words after that, it makes all the difference, because it suddenly resonated with something that moms already believed, which is that their children are picky eaters. And now you had a solution for that. And it also gave moms permission to believe that there was nothing wrong with their kids. It gave them permission to believe there was nothing wrong with them, with the mothers themselves, right? So this is a good example of how you design. This was Abbott's work. We've certainly worked with them on that, but this was a insight that was really, I would say, at a genius level for the marketers at Abbott.
It was a game changer.
Sorry, you were going to ask.
I was saying it was a game changer in that sense.
It was a game changer, absolute game changer. So, wherever we launched that campaign, you would see sales just rocket up. You would have in Mexico when we launched this campaign, Pediasure had been growing at about 1% per year for the last 5 years previous to that. And when this campaign was launched, within, I would say, a year, the sales had almost 10x. It had gone 10 times the original level. So there was just a major transformation and just a beautiful thing to watch.
Great. Now, let me also come to the point that in the last 16 months, we've become more conscious of the planet, of the purpose of people. Of course, profits are important. We have to look at it in terms of a holistic way. How do you create branding with a conscious? And branding is business. Business is marketing. They all are commercial endeavors. But how do you create that with a conscious? Give us examples from your book.
Okay. And, again, that is a very good question. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, with the pandemic, we have all had a chance to really reflect personally, and businesses also have had a chance to reflect on their own purpose and on their own conscience, and what is it that they are here for, right? But I think you have to really think about how do you do brands with a conscience, how do you have businesses with a conscience, and what is the right way to do it. It's not just like putting lipstick on a pig, so to speak, and if you're not thoughtful about it, you can make it seem like a farce. And so it's not a matter of, maybe we should give some money to the Cancer Society. Maybe we should, go and build some homes in poor neighborhoods or something like that. You can come up with a million different things, but what is right for you? What is right for your conscience, right? So what I argue in the book is that there are a few things that you have to look at. One is that whatever it is that you decide to do, and you should do something. Brands, this conscience piece, this purpose piece is a big part of the soul of the brand. So you should do it. But how you do it matters. And there are 3 principles that I articulate in the book. One is that whatever you do, it should be something that is connected deeply with your brand. It should be in sync. It should be part of the same mosaic that your brand is about. The second thing is that whatever it is that you do to help the world and so on, it should be something that you can do uniquely well, better than others. And that is what makes it suitable for your company to do it. And then the third thing I say is be authentic about it, really believe in it. And so, for example, here in the US, a lot of pharmaceutical companies jumped into the fray when the pandemic happened. A lot of companies tried to help. And, to me, that lives up to that second principle, which is that many of those companies did it for the right reasons. They did it for charity. And many of them got no return for it, by the way, because whatever efforts they made only partially succeeded or what have you. But nonetheless, it was the right thing for them to do because these healthcare companies were uniquely positioned to help the world in this particular situation. And there are examples of Indian companies as well that jumped into the frame, made investments ahead of the ahead of knowing whether, whether their investments would pan out. And so a lot of Indian companies did really well to get into that, Indian health companies. So, but every company needs to find the way that they can help. Another example that I give in the book is of a company here that is called Harry's, which is a mail-in company, where you can buy shavers and blades for those. And they give some percentage of their sales to men's mental health issues. And my argument against that was that, look, you're a shaving company, right? You're selling shavers. What's that got to do with mental health? Yes, it's for men, but that's not enough of a connection. What you could instead do is maybe do things like provide free shavers to people that can't afford it, right? And then you're doing something that's uniquely for you. And mind you, you could help people if you think of your company as a company that helps men groom themselves and look better. Well, grooming has value in people getting jobs, right? A lot of times what you find is that poor people cannot get jobs because they're not properly groomed when they go to their interviews. So a company like Harry's, which does shavers and is about grooming, would be better served in having causes which help people who can't afford it be better groomed and therefore better positioned in life for getting jobs and what have you. So you have to think about these principles, which is why you, and what is it that you can do better than anybody else? And are you really being authentic about this thing? Is there really a personal connection that your company has to that cause?
Fantastic. I think purpose and looking after communities, looking after consumers in a deep way, caring about them, and that being integral to the brand has become very important to consumers. Now, in the book, you also talk about you doing research in the heydays of internet, and so many companies that were launched then. I was reading the names. Possibly, if they were around today, they'd be multi-billion-dollar, trillion-dollar enterprises. They were ahead of time. I was looking at the brands, whether in the
Yeah.
insurance sector, in every of those sectors, there are big companies. Clearly, these are ideas which are possibly ahead of time.
Yes. I think,
But,
sorry, finish your
yeah, the
question.
question I'm trying to ask you is, I'm sure you watch India from there. And July is the month of multiple IPOs. Indian internet companies, new age, that have come up in the last 10 years, are looking to mop $25 billion from the bourses. It will be the biggest capital raised in a single month on Indian stock exchanges, whether it's a Zomato IPO, whether it's a Policy Bazaar IPO, or later the Paytm IPO. And consumer tech companies are looking to do IPOs. And there's no doubt that they have value and they're creating value and they're valuable to consumers. What I want to know is, do you agree with the valuation of the consumer internet stock? That's the question I want to ask you. And I'm sure sometimes you think about that.
Yeah. It is, so I think there are a couple of things there. So one is that many of these internet businesses, as we saw before, do provide a lot of value. And however, what we also learned from the first internet wave, where a lot of companies that provided a lot of distinctive value, like online groceries, online banking, and so on, things that we use all the time today, in the first internet revolution, all of those businesses failed. And I think the one thing that many of these businesses will do well to keep in mind is that it is not enough to just provide added value. You have to make sure that the brain is ready for these things, so that when you talk about consumers, that mentally they're ready for these new innovations that these companies are bringing to market. You have to bring people along. And sometimes what happens is that marketers get very complacent and they think that, hey, because I'm providing all these services which are so valuable, of course everybody's going to buy them. And that is not the case. And many times people don't buy things that are valuable. And that's simply because they're not mentally ready for it. So what these companies have to do, what they have to be careful is to make sure that their strength is not their weakness. Their strength is that they are technology companies. Their weakness is that they are technology companies, because they have to make sure that they are equally strong on consumer psychology as far as adoption is concerned. So that's one piece of it. Now, you also asked whether these valuations are overblown and what have you. Probably some of them are, but in other cases, these valuations are likely also justified in the sense that these companies they do add immense value and they have immense growth potential, which is going to be transformative to this world. So I do think that there is some of that. I think economists will tell you, and particularly Robert Shiller, who's also another one of those Nobel Prize winners who wrote this book, Irrational Exuberance. When these IPOs happens, you do have to, as an investor, be careful that there isn't that irrational exuberance going on. Because remember, one of the things that we discuss in the book as well is this whole notion of the herd effect, right? People want to belong to a herd. And the reason that all these companies are jumping in July is because they want to be a part of that herd that is
Yes,
going to win.
which is the question I have come to. I mean, you live in the US and you watch the movie The Big Shot. I watched the movie The Big Shot. Now, the Big Shot investor Michael Burry has again warned of a stock market bubble, and he specifically slammed Tesla, Robinhood, Bitcoin, and the GameStop frenzy in the last recent weeks.
Yes.
And nobody seems to be listening.
Yes, it's one of those things, and so I do think that there will undoubtedly be some of that irrational exuberance that Schiller talks about, and unfortunately, there is no way to predict when the bubble bursts. I think all of us would be multi-billionaires if we could predict when the bubble bursts. But so long as people stay on the bus keeps going. And you will undoubtedly have some companies.
You just don't want to be the last person on the bus.
You don't want to be the last person to get off the bus before the bus goes off the cliff, as we talked about. So I do think that people should be careful, but certainly a lot of these companies will also do well in the future. I think, because I remember when the first time when Amazon was there, and Amazon's share price kept going. I was at McKinsey at that time, and we analyzed Amazon in many different ways, my colleagues. And every time they would conclude that there is no way that this share price can keep going up. And every time they concluded that the share price would go up just a little bit more. And it still has continued to do that. It won't happen with every company like that. So I do think, there is going to be a shakeout in the industry probably, where those stocks which are irrationally exuberant being bought because there is a herding effect that people don't want to, or what we call fear of missing out, the FOMO effect, where people keep buying these things for fear of missing out on those gains. So yes, I mean, I think tread with caution is the right advice that you're giving there, Anurag.
Yeah. Now, because you look at things deeply, and you look at consumer behavior, you look at trends, you look at data, you look at sales. Give us your 3 definitive trends which come from right between the years, so to say, which is the central piece of what you're saying in your book.
Yes. So I do think, and particularly in the arena of marketing, there are at least 2 things which are going to transform marketing itself. One is, of course, technology. And, there are a lot of people who have made that argument and so on. And you have things like big data, you have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. So all of those things are happening as far as the technology piece is concerned. And then what is not being done so much, and where I think marketers are making a mistake, is on the right between the years side, which is marketers think that they understand consumer psychology, but they actually don't. And the reason is that consumer psychology actually is not, we all tend to be amateur psychologists. We all tend to think we can sort of be, sit in the armchair and analyze other people. And really you do need some professional help sometimes. You need a professional to do that job. And I think in marketing departments, what is missing today are people with that formal knowledge of formal knowledge of that cognitive psychology. So I do see that in the future you will have technology and you will have these deep cognitive psychology departments which are going to be living and breathing within the marketing department. And what is the trend that is going to drive, where is the intersection between the two, and what is the trend that it's going to drive? The trend really is humanization, which is that up until now, the focus of technology has been on making things, human free, if you will, automating things really. And really what the future has to be is not in making things less human, but in using technology to make things more humanized, if you will. So I think this is going to be a big trend which will influence brands and so on. The other piece, as we talked about, is going to be this whole notion about um, having brands that have empathy, which is what I call brand vibes, and having brands that have purpose, which is what we discussed about the whole notion of conscience and so on. So when you think of brands and when you think of that aura around them, that soul around them, what is in that soul? In that soul, there is empathy and there is purpose. So these are going to be some of the big trends which are going to shape marketing and therefore our interaction and our relationship with consumers in the future.
My last question, and I'll let you go. Now, clearly, a lot of brands are in the space which we these days call D2C, direct to consumer, digital to consumer. Now, when it comes to D2C marketing, when I was reading your book, I thought it addresses some of the areas without making narrow to just D2C, because at the end of the day, D2C is about some do it because they can't invest in physical distribution. If they had the money, they'd possibly do it, because even a lot of internet brands that are doing well are doing things in a hybrid way while they selling it as e-commerce on sites. They're setting up small stores because that really enhances the brand experience and the brand value and the brand equity and so on and so forth. So what is your view on D2C brands, the emergence of D2C brands, and do you see that most consumer brands will launch their version of D2C brands?
Yeah, so that gets you into this whole space of viral marketing and what have you, where how do brands sort of have this natural propagation amongst users. And I think where right between the ears helps you and is in understanding what are the types of things that get noticed and get propagated. So what the research shows is that consumers don't notice it when you do what they expect. And here's what I mean by it, which is, when you think about your brain, and there are some professors and some researchers that have argued that the brain hallucinates reality. And what do they mean by that? Which is that when you're looking at things and when you're perceiving things, you only take a snapshot of a few things, but the rest of it, you just imagine it's there. So you don't really look at things in detail. You just imagine that they're there, which is if you think about, how you got to work today and all the things that were on the way, you've just imagined them because they're usually always there. You expect them to be there and so on. So you just imagine it. In the same way, when all you do in a service is to deliver what is expected, you don't get noticed. So delivering on consumer expectations is not something that gets noticed. What gets noticed is things that are surprises, things that people did not expect. So there's this whole notion around surprise and delight, which gets noticed. And when you are able to do service or you're able to have products which can surprise and delight people, they get noticed and they get talked about, which is the most important factor in terms of people spreading that message and going and helping the products go viral. So that's one thing to think about. And then, of course, the piece that I also discussed, which we've talked about already, is this whole notion of striking this empathetic note with consumers. So if your brands can do surprise and delight, if they can do empathy and so on, they already have a leg up in terms of being able to mobilize other consumers, if you will. So I would say even C2C in that sense, mobilize other consumers and have them be your personal brand ambassadors, if you will.
Thank you so much for talking to us, Sandeep. I would definitely recommend your book to everyone. It's called Right Between the Years. It will help you build businesses, help you understand consumers better. And it's clearly, based on a lot of actual research work and lots of insights that Sandeep has got working with some of the largest brands in the business. So thank you so much, Sandeep, for talking to BW Marketing World. We'd let you go by saying that, clearly consumer marketing is changing as the way we live is changing, as the way we behave is changing, and more importantly, as habits are getting morphed, some for forever and some temporarily till we have to deal with this pandemic world. We're yet not in a fully post-pandemic world. We live with the fear of another variant of the virus coming along and restricting our lives, so to say. So clearly stay safe, stay vaccinated, and reduce your movements to as less as possible. Follow good COVID behavior. It could save lives. So all the best. We were talking to Sandeep Dayal, who's the author of Right Between the Years. It's a book on consumer behavior, how to build brands in a post-pandemic world, how our consumers in the digital age are looking at brands, what has worked, what hasn't worked. So it's a book that has lots of anecdotes, stories, metaphors, and real examples of how brands have been built and some trends in between. So I would strongly recommend this book to head of marketing of large corporations, brand managers, CMOs, people who are founders of businesses, and of course, the students and professors of marketing. Sometimes we professors have to learn more because they need to stay in sync while they have their own theories. But always a playbook to consumer behavior is an addition to their storytelling. So really, we all can learn from this. So I'd recommend this book very strongly. You can read a review of the book in the next issue of BW Business World, or watch an edited version of our conversation on BW Marketing World YouTube page. Thank you so much, Sandeep, again for talking to us. We wish you luck, and hopefully someday we can host you physically in India and do a discussion about your book. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Anurag, let me just say that I'm humbled to be on your wonderful show, and that with all these thoughtful these episodes that you've been doing, and I've seen many of them, and so with all these thoughtful episodes that you're doing, I think you're doing a lot to change the marketing world itself. So thank you so much for doing that.
Pleasure is all mine. Sandeep, can I tell you a secret? One, I love reading books. I don't read as much as I used to. I collect books these days, but it gives me an opportunity to read a bit, and it gives me an opportunity to learn something that I can apply in my own journey. So really, I look forward to doing this. I discovered some new things while reading your book, and I'll reread it. So really, the pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all of our readers and viewers. Grateful that you took our time to do it, and we'll do another conversation with another audience very soon again. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a good week. There's still 2 days to go, and I'm sure people will find your book very invigorating. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.